A strategy is something that can work for you based on your particular situation. A framework is something that will work no matter your situation. And this is important to understand in going from idea to launch with your no-code app. So let's take the weight loss world, for example. So a strategy you might follow to lose weight might include any of the hundreds of fad diets that are out there. Those are only going to work for you based on your particular situation, but they're not going to work for other people. On the flip side, though, a framework is something that will work no matter what. So a piece of a framework for losing weight might be to eat correct portion sizes. No matter the fad diet you're following, you're going to be eating correct portion sizes, right? So no matter the situation, it's applicable. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a framework that you can follow to go from idea to launch with your no-code app, and it will help you do that in a streamlined way, no matter your situation. I'm going to walk you through something called the design hierarchy of needs, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to guide you through a little bit of context. The design hierarchy of needs is actually modeled after Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, if you've never heard of this, it's basically a framework to help us understand what motivates us as human beings. So here's kind of a simplified view of this framework. It basically says that until a human being meets their physiological needs, for example, like food, water, warmth, and rest, they're not going to be motivated to focus on their safety needs, like security, right? These are their basic needs that must be met in order to focus on that next level of needs. Love needs, belongingness, esteem, right? Self-actualization, those all come next. Now, you can find another instance of this in the book called Fix This Next by Mike Michalowicz. So he actually created a business hierarchy of needs, and I'll show you the visual here inside the book just so you can have a reference, and I'll talk you through it. So essentially, this hierarchy says that a business must meet their sales needs first, so they need to have money coming in before they're going to focus on anything else. And that next level would be profit. So, okay, sales are coming in, great. Now let's make those profitable sales. Let's increase the profit, or actually create profit in the first place. Okay, once you have that, perfect. Now let's look at order, which is the next level. So we have those sales coming in, we're profitable. Now let's start systematizing things so that we can do that repeatedly. And it goes up from there, but it's essentially the same concept, where you're not going to focus on the next level of needs until you've accomplished that first level or the one before it. So that brings us back to the design hierarchy of needs. Now, you can find out more about this in a book called The Universal Principles of Design. Now, when we say design, we're not necessarily talking about aesthetic design, but rather the entire creation process of a product as a whole. But what I'm going to do now is walk you through the different levels of the design hierarchy of needs so that you can use it as you build and launch your own app. So the design hierarchy of needs looks something like this. It has 5 levels, and the first level is function. Now, function is essentially where your product meets the very basic functional needs. It just does at the very core what it needs to do from a functional standpoint, but it doesn't necessarily provide a lot of value yet. It's not something that you're going to be selling because some of the next levels need to come before that. The next level is reliability. Now, this is essentially where you are making sure that your product is reliable, or in other words, that you're building a scalable app. So can you test your app as a user and get positive results one time, and then test again and get those same results and do it again and again repeatedly? Or is there a lot of variation and inconsistency, right? So you have to have that function first, but then you need it to reliably function. Above that, we have usability. Now, usability is really just making sure that your app's design is simple. So, the user experience design, the user interface design, making those really simple so that your app is at a baseline just usable. Not going beyond that with the design, but again, just creating that baseline so that users don't get stuck or confused when they're going through your app and going through the flows. It's just usable. The next level above that is proficiency. Now, this one is really interesting because this is the first time where you take those baselines that you've created and you start enhancing them. So you take your functionable, reliable, usable app and you start making it better. So maybe you make the app more fun to use. Maybe you add gamification. Maybe you make it more convenient to use or more proficient to use based on the feedback that you're getting in certain areas of your app. So again, you're taking those baselines you've created and you're improving them. And lastly, at the very top, we have creativity. And this is where you start focusing on that aesthetic beauty. So you start getting creative with the design, right? So you have taken your functioning, reliable, usable product, then you've made it better, and now you're making it more creative. Now, if we go back to Maslow's hierarchy for just a second, you can see that each of these levels have actually been grouped. So the first two levels, physiological and safety needs, those have been grouped into a category of basic needs. And above that, we have a category of psychological needs. And then lastly, these self-fulfillment needs. Now, we can actually group the design hierarchy of needs in similar ways that will be helpful as you build your app. When you're creating the first version of your app, it's actually still a theory until you've actually used it. Now, even if you're building the app for your own personal needs, this is true. Up to this point, you've envisioned how the app will be applicable in certain processes, but until you actually put your hands on it or get other users' hands on it, you can't prove that theory, and things will always change no matter what. Now, I share that context because it's going to allow us to create our first category within this hierarchy. So for our first category, we are going to deem these first three levels as the pilot app category. Now, your pilot app is the very initial version of your product that you're going to use to get product validation. So you're taking that theory that you have and you are putting it into a real life situation and making sure that that theory is valid. Now, pretty much 100% of the time, there are going to be changes. Again, no matter if you are building this app for external users or even building it for yourself, there are going to be changes, which is why we don't go higher up the pyramid or the hierarchy until we get these three right. Now, before you move up the hierarchy, you'll actually go through a more established beta testing period. Now, the pilot app, like I said, is for product validation, but with beta testing, it's a little bit different. This is where you take the final validated product, or rather the first version of it, and then you put it through a fuller testing process where you have more users take the app, use it on their own in real life applications on a consistent basis. So with that pilot app, you are testing for product validation. With the beta app, which is technically the same version with maybe some subtle changes or rather fixes and iterations, and you're making sure it's adoptable. So valid compared to adoptable. So for our next category, we're actually going to just include the proficiency level as we're going to call it the beta to rollout category. Now we're kind of combining these because when you are at that proficiency level of the hierarchy, remember you're focusing on ways to make the app maybe more convenient or fun and enjoyable to use. So you are taking the feedback that you will have gotten from your beta period, where your feedback is focused on adoptability, and you are implementing that, or maybe you've already started to implement it, and you're now kind of rolling out the app. Now, this can sound a little bit vague because there doesn't necessarily need to be a start and a stop. You don't have to hard stop your beta testing, shut down the app, and then restart it to that rollout period. You're just going to kind of gradually go into it. So that proficiency level is kind of that in-between period. You are making the app more proficient as you are kind of just naturally rolling it out to your wider market. So at the very top, that leaves us with this creativity level, and we're going to put that into the category of scale. So the most important thing to remember, and I say the most important because I see a lot of misconception around this, but if you have a functioning, reliable, usable, and proficient product, only then should you start to focus on improving the aesthetics of the application, making the aesthetic appearance more creative. But if you flip those priorities and you focus too much on that aesthetic appearance too soon, you're going to have a really hard time getting any traction with your app because you won't be solving your users' problems in the way that you need to be. And at the end of the day, that's why they're going to be coming to you. Now, these levels here specifically, function, reliability, and usability, or the pilot app that we talked about, this is where we help our own clients, because in order to move up that next level to focusing on the proficiency, the creativity, or the rollout of your app, the scale of your app, you have to get that pilot product correct. That's the foundational piece. So remember, we have function, make it work, right? Make that core product work. And then we have reliability. Make sure you're following best practices with your development. Build your app in scalable ways that will help it perform. And we have usability. Make sure that you are creating a simply designed app. Don't confuse your users, just make it usable. Now, from there, we focus on proficiency. All right, that core pilot app works. Now let's make it work better and in different ways that are more convenient, more enjoyable, for example. And finally, creativity. Okay, we're scaling now. Let's hone in on the design and let's really take this thing to the next level. So this is a framework that you can use to help you launch your app a lot more easily, no matter your situation. Now, if you want more of these frameworks, we actually go through them in a lot more depth over in our free training at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. And these frameworks cover some of the different steps that you'll go through as you navigate your way from idea to launch. So head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop to go through those. We'll hope to see you there, and I hope this was helpful in the meantime.